We interrupt this regularly scheduled fantasy baseball today because we have some breaking news. Yasiel Puig has signed with the Atlanta Braves. Frank Stanfield here with Chris Towers to give you a little bit of an update here. And Chris, we were wondering where it was going to happen. We've heard the rumors of the Baltimore Orioles, the San Francisco Giants. This is a pretty damn good lineup that now features Ronald Acuna, Yasiel Puig, Marcell Ozuna, hopefully, eventually, Freddie Freeman. It's a pretty good spot.
It's not a bad spot. You know, if you were talking about what the best landing spot for Yasiel Puig would have been for fantasy, it would have been either Baltimore or Colorado in terms of teams that had been linked to him at some point. But, because those are not better lineups than Atlanta, but have more opportunity for playing time and are better parks, whereas Atlanta's more of a neutral park. And, you look at this and all of a sudden, this is it was already a pretty crowded situation, especially when Freeman was healthy, because there was questions about whether Austin Riley would be in the lineup every day, whether Ender Inciarte would play every day, whether Johan Camargo would be the everyday third baseman. And I think we'll still see a situation where Puig plays. I guess he's going to be the everyday left fielder.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I guess the question is, how much does Ender Inciarte play? That's going to be the key question, because if Inciarte plays, that moves Acuna to one of the corner spots and leaves basically a corner spot and a DH spot for Yasiel Puig and Marcell Ozuna. And if one of them is in the DH spot, and presumably it would be Ozuna, although he does have experience playing center field as well, so he might not be a significantly worse option defensively than Yasiel Puig. But if one of them's in that DH spot, then that leaves Austin Riley and Johan Camargo battling for third base when Freeman's healthy. I think until Freeman's back in the lineup, or if Freeman's not back in the lineup by opening day, I think there's room for Yasiel Puig to play every day. There's room for Marcell Ozuna to play every day. And I don't think there's much question Ozuna will play every day. Puig, it's a little more of a question, I think.
Ozuna's an absolute butcher in the outfield, so I think that they want to use him as their DH, and I think the plan was Austin Riley was going to play left field, but I would agree with you. I think Puig probably slots in left field. It sounds like they want Inciarte in there regularly in center field because he is a great defender, so Austin Riley could slide over to first base until Freddie Freeman is ready and maybe take over third base, because obviously he has higher prospect pedigree than someone like Johan Camargo.
And Camargo was really bad last year.
Yeah.
He was a below replacement level player last season. Obviously, he was better than that his first 2 years, but just worth pointing out that in 248 plate appearances, he had a negative .5 WAR.
For Yasiel Puig, last year he was a top 30 outfielder in both formats. Chris, specifically in Roto, he was outfielder 25. He was a top 70 player in that format. I think we can agree he is a better Roto play. 23 or more home runs, 15 or more steals in 3 straight seasons. He's been between a 263 and 267 batting average each of the past 4 seasons. I think my knee-jerk reaction to this is that I'm going to move him up around that Max Kepler, Lourdes Gurriel range of outfielders, just inside the top 40, and I think in ADP, he's probably between 130 and 150. Does that sound accurate to you, Chris? Should he be higher than that, lower than that? What do you think?
No, that sounds about right. I would have been more excited if he had signed somewhere else. If he had signed in Colorado, I think he would have been a top 75 pick, but alas, the Rockies are the Rockies. But no, he is one of those, as we talked about earlier or later on this podcast. I'm not sure when this is going to be inserted, so you'll find out.
Right at the top, baby. Right at the top, Chris.
Okay, so as we talk about later in today's podcast, which was recorded earlier, Scott Kingery and Will Myers are 2 of the last 20 home or 20 steal guys in a full season that you can draft, and that makes them pretty valuable in Roto. Well, Yasiel Puig is another one of those guys. 24 home runs, 19 stolen bases last season, at least 15 steals in 3 straight years. He is a power speed threat who won't kill you in batting average. And I think there's room for improvement from the 267 mark he's been at. I mean, basically 4 years in a row, he's been remarkably consistent in batting average. But, he's had years where the strikeout rate's lower. He's had years where the BABIP was higher. If he can put them both together, I think there's room for Yasiel Puig to be a 275, 280 hitter. And so then you're talking about a guy who can be a legitimate 5-category contributor in fantasy. So yeah, I think he's a good combination of a high floor player in Roto with upside. So yeah, 40th at outfield, top 150 makes perfect sense to me.
Chris, if I asked you his ownership percentage on CBS, what would you say it is?
24%.
32. Get out there and add Yasiel Puig right now. If you are listening to this, drop everything and go add Yasiel Puig. Ultimately, I think when everything shakes out, Freeman will be at first. I think Austin Riley will play third. I think Puig is in left. I think Inciarte is in center. And I think Marcell Ozuna is at DH. Does that sound all right to you, Chris?
Yeah, and it is worth noting that Austin Riley was definitely mentioned as one of the possible first base options. There was a report from MLB.com over the weekend that he might have been the leader in terms of the battle for first base playing time with Freddie Freeman out. So, it does sound like there are plenty of opportunities for him to get in the lineup. And with Austin Riley, as we talk about later on this podcast with pitchers, there are workload concerns, but if you pitch well enough, they're not really going to be a concern. I think that's mostly the case with Austin Riley. If he hits, he's going to play every day. I don't think there's any question about that. And so if you believe he's going to hit, Austin Riley is still, his ADP really has not risen, even with the addition of the DH. Like he's still been, late 200s in ADP. As long as he's still there on draft day, and if this causes him to fall to the last rounds, he's kind of a perfect late final round pick or final 3-round pick to make sure you get him, because Austin Riley does have significant, 40 homer and a full season potential.
Especially in that lineup. Oof, what a lineup it is, the Atlanta Braves. Yeah. Yasiel Puig signs with the Atlanta Braves. He is Chris. I am Frank. Now back to your normally scheduled Tuesday Fantasy Baseball Today podcast. Sleepers. Who doesn't love a good sleeper? Welcome to Fantasy Baseball Today, Tuesday, July 14th. And would you look at that? Team Facts. Frank, Adam, Chris Towers, Scott are all back in business together. Guys, it's been a hot minute since we've had all 4 of us together on the show. So you know what that means? Today's podcast is going to be 2 hours long. How are you doing?
Good. Let's do it. Marathon pod. I'm here for it.
Adam, what's up, man?
I want to make a joke that's a little risque. That since it's so early in the show, that if you feel like you can't air it, that you could just start over. What do you think?
Sure.
I hope we're leaving all this in.
We're Team Facts. It's a good thing my name is not Ulysses. Right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just not a very good joke.
No, it's not.
Adam, do you still have the cricket button on your soundboard? You want to play that for us?
Is it playing?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah.
That worked out quite well. Scott is here. Scott's wearing a Blue Jays hat. You can see that on our Fantasy Baseball Today YouTube channel. Shout out to Nate Pearson.
Not a current Blue Jay.
I like that hat though.
Either.
That's a nice
what
hat.
era? What era would you describe this as? The Brett Lawrie era of Blue Jays?
Yeah.
When I see that, I think Roy Halladay, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey Frank,
What's up?
I said, good thing my name's not Ulysses.
Oh man, Adam has his own soundboard. He has his own mic drops now, and here we go. It's gonna be a long
the
episode.
trailing off laughter.
You hate
That's
to
how
see
funny
it.
the joke was.
Today on the show, we have sleepers. We are going to recap our position previews, and we will answer your questions. Continue to email us, fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Let's start off with some of those sleepers. Scott, why don't you get us started? Who's your favorite sleeper in 2020?
Do I even have to say who my favorite sleeper is? You know who my favorite sleeper is. You can say it for me. It's fine.
It's Mark Canha. But I will say this. I listened to your guys' sleepers episode back in March, and your favorite sleeper then was Mark Canha, and Chris's was Mitch Keller, and Adam's was Chris Davis. So, I don't know. Should we go in a different direction since we've talked a lot about Mark Canha?
If we must, we must. My favorite sleeper beyond Mark Canha, I gotta tell you, right now it might be Alex Wood. I've kind of gone back and forth on Alex Wood. Obviously, the constant thread has been he spent the off season, which I guess now was almost a year ago. He spent the off season working out driveline baseball, adding some velocity to his pitches. That workout program has had a lot of success for pitchers, particularly in that area, adding velocity. And he's been throwing since then at a velocity we haven't seen since the first half of 2017, I believe. My computer is not cooperating here, so I'm just having to go top of mind. But I believe it was 2017, the first half for Alex Wood, where he went like 10-0 with a 175-ish ERA, crazy strikeout rate. So that's really the basis for the whole Alex Wood sleeper argument. So after that, it just becomes an issue of how much length the Dodgers are going to give him, what kind of role they're going to give him. And obviously they have a lot of exciting alternatives in their pitching staff. Dustin May was great down the stretch, top pitching prospect. Normally you don't see a top pitching prospect do what he did last year and not have a rotation spot. And yet that's how things are lining up. And, they announced Alex Wood was going to be in the rotation way back in spring training, but you figure, okay, things are going to change, shortened season, expanded rosters. They're going to piggyback pitchers. Doesn't seem like they're doing that with Alex Wood. He is one of three that are really ahead of the others in terms of being stretched out. Clayton Kershaw, no surprise there. Alex Wood and actually Ross Stripling. I mean, you can make a pretty strong sleeper case for him too. You think he'd be piggybacked, but he's not.
I was just gonna say that though. They're going kind of similarly in ADP, Stripling and Wood. So who would you take?
I would take Wood because he's ahead in the pecking order. I mean, Ross Stripling's track record is I guess more spotless than Wood's is. It isn't as lengthy. And he doesn't have that stretch that Alex Wood had the first half of 2017, where he was basically the best pitcher in baseball with the velocity he's showing now. And that's the only time he's had the velocity he's showing now. So, I'm not going to say he's going to be quite that good again, but do I think he could be must start good again, Alex Wood? Yes, absolutely. And obviously you're not paying near that price for him.
Alex Wood, the last time we saw that velocity, 92, 93 miles per hour, Scott referenced it. It was the first half of 2017. He had a 1.67 ERA with a 0.89 whip in the first half for Alex Wood of 2017. And then Ross Stripling in his career as a starter has a 3.71 ERA and a 1.20 whip. I am definitely intrigued in both of those guys as well. Ross Stripling hasn't officially been named a starter yet, but he has been working as a starter throughout summer camp, and he's been stretched out. So it looks like it is trending that way. Chris, why don't you give us one of your favorite sleepers here in 2020?
Yeah, I tend to go by a little different rules. Most people will say like a sleeper has to be past pick X, typically in the triple digits.
Chris, the only thing that I will ask is that you do not say Giancarlo Stanton.
Giancarlo Stanton is my favorite sleeper for 2020. I'm not saying that as a bit. I genuinely believe it. I think his talent level is being slept on. I think, we've had this conversation 25 times, but I think how good he is being a little bit forgotten because of the injuries. Like there's downgrading because of injuries, and then there's what has happened to Giancarlo Stanton. He is 63rd in NFC ADP since the middle of June, right around when the announcement that the season was coming back. He is only one spot behind Nelson Cruz. Nelson Cruz might actually be the answer for favorite sleeper because he is. I think they are players who are just literally being slept on. Their value is being slept on. So yeah, I'm gonna go with 2 early round guys. Sorry, everyone. I'll have later round guys later.
All right, Chris, it's later now. How about you give us your favorite sleeper outside of the top 150?
Oh, such a jerk.
He's
blanking.
deep in thought.
No, I'm not blanking. I'm trying to figure out Malik Smith. How about that?
All right.
With how valuable stolen bases are right now, I think Malik Smith is being penalized too much for a down season where he still led the majors in steals.
All right. That's
it.
fair enough. That's easy enough for me, for Alex Smith. And we talked about him.
I thought we were trying to move quickly. I didn't.
That was great. That was great.
Come on, guys.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Chris.
You are giving me conflicting signals right now. I can't deal with this. Come on.
All right, I'll give you a few sleepers I like here, and you guys let me know what you think about these guys. Some late round hitters. Will Myers for me, someone who I've moved up my rankings, and I continue to move him up. I have him all the way up as my 47th outfielder in Roto. So he just continues to climb. 2016, he had 259, 28 homers, 28 steals. He was a top 6 outfielder in both formats. He was top 20 overall in Roto. If you think he's just done, then yeah, you should probably avoid him. But he's only 29 years old, and I think with the universal DH, he is someone that will play regularly, and it should help him stay healthy for Will Myers. So right now, in 32 NFBC drafts this month, he is the 62nd outfielder off the board, an ADP of 238. So he's climbing up a little bit, but I still don't think it's as high as it should be. And then Carter Kieboom. I just don't understand. When it comes to Carter Kieboom, people have gone too far the other way. He hit 128 with a 491 OPS last year, 43 plate appearances in the majors. Yet he is a top 25 prospect. He has a starting job to begin the season with the Washington Nationals. He's going to play third base. He's going to have dual eligibility. He hit 287 with an 847 OPS in the minors. I don't understand why people are not drafting Carter Kieboom higher than they are. So 2 hitters for me, Will Myers and Kieboom.
Yeah, no, I could make the same argument. You want me to give another one now?
Sure.
I could make the same Kieboom case for Austin Riley of the Braves.
Yep, you can.
Whose playing time seems pretty assured now with the addition of the DH spot and Freddie Freeman possibly not available for the start of the season. Actually, the thinking is if Freeman isn't, Riley would be the one playing first base with Johan Camargo at third base, Adam Duvall in left field, Marcell Ozuna at DH. Ozuna seems locked into that DH spot. I think the thinking is Riley's a better left fielder even than Ozuna is playing, even though Riley's playing out of position there, obviously a natural third baseman. But the point is, Riley gets off, like the at-bats are assured for Riley there at the beginning. If he gets off to a good start, they'll either move him to third base in place of Camargo or to left field in place of Duvall and just let him do his thing. I think he has arguably the most raw power on the entire Braves team, which is saying something on a team that also includes Ronald Acuna. Like Riley is a 70 grade power bat. And he showed it obviously last year with 9 home runs in his first 18 games. And, you know, he was the bee's knees at that point and then just collapsed. And so nobody wants anything to do with him anymore. But 23-year-old former top prospect who, has that kind of power potential. For a next to nothing cost, the likelihood he's going to be dual or perhaps even triple eligible eventually. Getting that kind of power bat that late in drafts is I think a must in rotisserie leagues. So Austin Riley, he's going on average 293rd overall, right? around 300th overall.
Yeah, and he has climbed a little bit in 32 drafts in the NFBC in the month of July. His ADP is at 269, so he climbed up a little bit as a result, likely, of the universal DH. Adam's here. What's up, Adam? Let's get you involved. Who would you rather have, my sleeper or Scott's sleeper, Will Myers or Austin Riley?
Austin Riley. Will Myers is not a good hitter. I do like the steals, so I guess if I needed 15 steals, maybe he can give you, a 15 steal pace. Maybe he can give you more than that. Hasn't been that long, but he strikes out too much. He hits 250 if you're lucky. His on-base percentage is terrible. I don't think he's going to score a lot of runs. I'd rather take more upside in Riley. But another guy in the Austin Riley, Carter Kieboom vein that maybe is being penalized too much for a bad season is Danny Jansen. I can't say I've drafted Danny Jansen, but the antenna would go up if he had a really good start and he were on waivers because, he had a really bad year last year. He had a 50-game stretch in the midst of it that was very good. We know he can get on base. And again, it happened to Rafael Devers. It happens to young players sometimes. They have bad seasons. Mm-hmm. They live and they learn, they get better. So Danny Jansen, a super late pick. You can wait in a one-catcher league and take Danny Jansen. Even in a 14-team league or something, you can do that. So that would be a sleeper for me. I also think Stripling would be my favorite, by the way, of all these late round pitchers or I would say strip. I was going to say Rich Hill, but his ADP has climbed up to like the 160 range. And what I want to know from you, Frank, was you said you moved Will Myers up to 48-ish or something. Who are the outfielders that you have around him in your rankings?
So pulling that up for you right now. And I moved him up to 47 in Roto, just ahead of Adam Eaton. This might be a little egregious. J.D. Davis, Hunter Dozier, Mark Canha, Alex Verdugo. But I do like this range. I like this range a lot. Myers, Davis, Canha, Verdugo. The other guys more so in head-to-head points leagues. But because of Roto, I gave Myers the slight advantage because I do think that he can swipe some bags and provide some steals.
Here's one question I have. Where do you have Scott Kingery? Because that is one of those things when you say Will Myers is ahead of those guys, it's like, ooh, I don't know about that. But then, like, Scott Kingery is, being drafted not for free.
Yep, I have him at 37. I have him outfielder 37 in Roto.
So you got Kingery really high,
Yeah,
too.
see, like, I actually don't think there's that much of a difference between Scott Kingery and Will Myers. I think Kingery's getting a bit of a bump for being a young guy, but he has pretty much the exact same plate discipline issues that Will Myers does. And so
where's he eligible?
He's eligible in more places, sure.
Right.
He's
Third base
and
and outfield.
For now, he's going to get second base early on.
I think that's a big difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, getting second base eligibility would be very helpful, but third and outfield, I don't think that's really that big. That shouldn't push his value up too much. And so, that's one where I kind of came into the year thinking Scott Kingery would be one of my favorite sleepers, and I've kind of gone off of him because I think Will Myers is going to do a perfectly reasonable facsimile of what Scott Kingery will do for a lot cheaper.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't disagree with that specifically. It's just I don't want Scott Kingery ahead of J.D. Davis or Mark Canha himself, much less Will Myers. Sure. But my previous thinking on Scott Kingery was that he was the last of the likely 2020 guys to go off the board, and considerably after the next to last, Danny Santana. But now Will Myers has become, when I say 2020, I'm obviously talking about the pace over a shortened season. Now Will Myers has become the last of the likely 2020 guys, and he goes even much later than Kingery. So I think that's fair. And, just to kind of calibrate everything here, you asked Adam whether he would prefer your sleeper Will Myers or mine Austin Riley. Well, I would actually prefer yours Will Myers of the two. If I need steals, obviously, if I don't need steals, then, I do think Riley has the higher ceiling overall. But that kind of calibrates everything for
There you go. Adam is back, and Scott's phone is ringing. Let's go.
It didn't go off yesterday, I don't think.
It didn't.
It's the return of Adam, man.
Yeah, now it's like 3 out of the last 4.
Chris, give me a few more names you like as sleepers this season. Some of your favorites.
Yeah, sure. Joe Musgrove, Mitch Keller.
Yeah, I didn't mention Musgrove because I talk about Musgrove so much, but of course, Musgrove is on the list.
Yeah, I think both of them figure to benefit from new pitching coach in Pittsburgh. And I feel like people might be getting the sense that we think Oscar Marin is like a miracle worker when he doesn't have any kind of track record as a pitching coach at the major league level. And
he's the new Ray Searage.
Well, that's not really how I view it. It's more just that I think the Pirates were so far beyond the times that if they just get to like average in terms of their use of statistics and forward-thinking analysis, it's going to make it a big impact for a guy like Musgrove who saw a velocity bump, for a guy like Mitch Keller who has a lot of velocity and really good secondary pitches. Those guys have the tools to be really good, and I have more confidence in the Pirates putting them in a position to get the most out of those tools than I did before. I'll also throw out Dylan Cease, who is another kind of post-hype sleeper, was a pretty big time pitching prospect, was number 2, I believe, in the White Sox organization. Well, 3, I guess. It was Eloy, Kopech, and Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease is super talented, and he spent the offseason, working with the TrackMan data and some of those advanced pitching tools to try to figure out, where he went wrong with his mechanics, where he went wrong with his pitch selection, and the talent is all there. He's got great stuff. And really, if he can just get the control figured out, I think Dylan Cease has the potential to be a very good pitcher beginning this season.
And I think something that we probably talked about at some point but haven't mentioned it recently is that Yasmani Grandal is going to be huge for the pitching staff of the White Sox. He is one of the best pitch framers in baseball. He's going to be able to steal strikes for a lot of these young pitchers. It could help Ronaldo Lopez. It should help Dylan Cease, specifically in lowering that walk rate. And if it helps Lucas Giolito, I mean, I don't know how much better Lucas Giolito can actually get. Adam, Chris mentioned 2 Pirates there. I have a multiple choice question for you. Would you rather draft A, Joe Musgrove, B, Mitch Keller, C, none of the above?
You know, like just because I respect you so much, I will say Joe Musgrove.
Yeah.
I've never been that impressed, but there's something there, and you guys are good analysts, so I'll say Joe Musgrove would be my answer there. Mitch Keller seems like he's got a long way to go. I mean, he's got to get a lot better than he was last year. You know, I just don't know that this is going to be the year. I understand long term, there's a lot to like for Mitch Keller, but just how bad he was last year, for him to go from that bad to for him to Giolito it, you know, that'd be pretty tough.
He might be.
I think
in what ways was he actually bad? That's
his ERA was over 7.
Adam, there's actually
that is one way he was bad.
His BABIP was 475.
That was not actually, you said he would Giolito it. That's actually not the preferred term. The preferred term is Jose Barrios it. It's easy to forget now, but Barrios made 14 starts in 2016 with and this is not a misprint, 8.02 ERA and 1.869 whip. He was worse than Mitch Keller, and he was actually worse. He had a 620 FIP. Jose Barrios in his first 14 starts in the majors was a disaster. He was about as bad as a pitcher could possibly be. And then he came back the next season and had a 3.89 ERA and nearly a strikeout per inning. So,
all right.
You know, I just think it's a situation where you bet on the talent, you bet on the minor league track record, which for Mitch Keller is very good. And, you know, there's another obvious name who wore the same uniform and who was held back by Ray Searage in similar ways. And that's Tyler Glasnow, another guy who put up dynamite numbers all through his minor league career, gets called up to the Pirates, all of a sudden can't get any swings and misses, can't get any strikeouts, can't stop walking anyone. It's a situation where I just think you want to bet on the talent and bet on the situation being better. I actually might like Mitch Keller more than Joe Musgrove.
All right, okay, but here's the thing. We've talked about this topic a lot and what the short season is going to be like for starting pitchers. And I believe that the ones who have yet to prove that they can go deep into games are going to be the ones that have the quick hooks, because there's going to be a sense of urgency for these teams. They're all in the playoff race for 60.
The Pirates aren't.
Well, the Pirates could be for a month. You never know. So I don't think that this is going to be the year for young pitchers who are not established. Now, I think like Jesus Luzardo is going to be an exception. But these young pitchers with high pedigree, I'm just not sure this is the year that they are able to really showcase their abilities.
If you're not watching, if you're just listening to the podcast, Scott just made a kind of sideways grunting kind of face or grimacing kind of face. And I'm with Scott there. What you mentioned, Jesus Luzardo might be the exception. I think it's going to come down to, like, Jesus Luzardo, I think, is going to have workload questions.
If it wasn't evident before, the fact he hasn't reported to camp.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I understand. I'm saying, you know, I understand Luzardo's been dealing with COVID, right? Or is that established or just rumor?
He actually is tested positive, though I don't think he has symptoms.
Forget Luzardo. That's the point. Is most young pitchers who haven't gone through the order 3 times, they're going to be the ones that are most at risk of getting pulled. That's my personal opinion. I want more established veteran pitchers in this shortened season than I normally would.
I think that's fair. I will also just say, if Mitch Keller's as good as he can be, it's not going to matter. Like, it's ultimately going to come down to, is he good or not? If he's not good, then he probably doesn't belong on your team because he's not going to go deep into games anyway. But if Mitch Keller is the kind of like mid-3s ERA, good control, great strikeout rate guy I think he can be, then it ultimately, like, Blake Snell doesn't throw a lot of pitches. He went deep into games the year he had a 1.89 ERA because he was really efficient, and he didn't go deep into games the next year. So that kind of stuff is very heavily tied to results. And so it just comes down to your comfort level in believing in the talent of a Mitch Keller or a Dylan Cease or a Nate Pearson.
Yeah, those are lottery ticket plays.
Yeah.
Like that's, if you're approaching them as more than that, if you're approaching them as, okay, I'm going to draft this guy and know that this spot on my pitching staff is going to be filled capably, then you're doing it wrong. Like you're drafting them for the upside. And if it doesn't break through, you need to have a quick hook for them. I do get the idea that like you can't afford to mess around as much with lottery tickets at the start of the season like you could in a full length season, because you have to be good right out of the gate probably to stand a chance in your league this year. So that I agree, it kind of lowers the value of all those guys relative to somebody more proven like Joe Musgrove. But I still think the upside is higher and the breakout is absolutely on the table for somebody like Mitch Keller.
The last
you know
names,
what? I like one of Chris's sleepers too, and Steven Matz. His curveball that has been impressive in camp so far, and he's his ADP. Let me check Steven Matz ADP.
I mean, it's basically it's like beyond 300. He's a guy that I've been hurt by many times in my life and will continue to take chances on him. I feel like Dylan Bundy's that guy for a lot of people this year.
Steven Matz's ADP in the month of July in NFBC is 291. Yeah. So he's going just behind Dallas Keuchel, Yanni Chirinos, Cole Hamel, Spencer Howard.
I've said my piece, Frank.
The last names that I wanted to mention quickly are Dylan Bundy, the one that Chris just brought up. I think the change from Baltimore to Anaheim is one that can only help him. He has struggled mightily with home runs. I think getting out of Camden Yards is something that will help him. And he has averaged right around a strikeout per inning in his career last year, a 12.9% swinging strike rate. So I'm intrigued in Dylan Bundy. And then Nate Eovaldi. Last year I was in on Nate Eovaldi. I'm going right back to the well. He actually pitched today in an inter-squad game, 4 innings pitched, 1 unearned run, 3 strikeouts, and it looks like he's going to be the opening day starter. Life comes at you fast, especially if you're Nate Eovaldi. He was very good in 2018. He's just got to get back to that form. Used his cutter a lot that year. That's what we need to see out of Nate Eovaldi. Scott, anyone you want to bring us home with real quick?
Yeah, I've given you 2 names so far, so I'll try and give you 2 here fairly quickly. Back in on Josh James of the Astros. He finally reported yesterday. He was delayed because of the birth of his child. He says he's ready to throw 75 to 80 pitches right away. He's been working out 5 days a week. And like the Astros are, their options are becoming limited. I mean, with Jose Urquidy on the IL. We don't know exactly why, but he's on the IL and we don't know exactly when he's returning. So it seems likely he won't be ready for the start of the season. And if Josh James, if they're satisfied with where Josh James is physically, I still think he's probably in line for a rotation spot for the Astros. And 15 Ks per 9 as a reliever last year, triple digit fastball. You look at his minor league track record as a starter, really his last year, because he was kind of a late bloomer, but it was dominant. I think he could dominate with a great supporting cast behind him. And one more name, is it too obvious to say Gio Urshela? Do I even need to get into that? Am I as tied to Gio Urshela as I am to Mark Canha and Jimmy Davis?
I would say so.
Davis,
yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. It's gonna great late round source of batting average and RBI and fine for power.
News and notes. Jordan Hicks opted out of the season yesterday, citing his type 1 diabetes. Scott, what happens in this bullpen? Giovanni Gallegos has yet to report to camp. They've been talking up Ryan Helsley potentially as a closer candidate. Last year, a 2.95 ERA, 1.25 WHIP, but he was below 8 Ks per 9. He does throw the ball hard, but it hasn't necessarily translated to strikeouts. Again, that's Ryan Helsley. And then Carlos Martinez was actually pretty good as the closer last year. He had 24 saves, low 3s ERA, 1.18 WHIP. What do you think happens here, Scott?
So I am about 66.6 repeated % confident now that it's Helsley. Gallegos could report and get ready quickly because he's a reliever and maybe it'll still go to him. Even though Carlos Martinez showed up over the weekend and struck out 4 batters in 2 innings and looks like physically he's at a point where he could start, just because The Cardinals have lost Hicks now, and they don't know where Gallegos stands, and they lost John Brebbia to Tommy John surgery, which I totally missed. That happened in June. They're kind of depleted in the bullpen, and they just may need Carlos Martinez there more. And if he does go to the bullpen, I think it would obviously be to close. So
yeah, I don't think he's going to the bullpen to be a middle reliever or setup guy.
Right. And now it may just be a short-term thing for Martinez, and when they get Gallegos back, maybe they reshuffle. But I think if you're forcing me to pick one guy for saves for the Cardinals today, I'm picking Ryan Helsley, but it's still very murky.
I'm actually making drafting Carlos Martinez more of a priority now than I was before all this, because I think I'm more confident he'll be the closer than I am that he would have been a very good starter. But either way, now that he's reported, if he ends up being a starter, I think he'll have value. If he ends up being the closer, I think he'll have even more value. And so, he was a guy I made sure to get in that auction draft last week. And I'm really excited about Carlos Martinez coming out of the bullpen.
Scott, how high would you draft Helsley? Is he in that group of Hunter Harvey, the speculative Giants relievers? Is he that high yet?
I'll put him ahead of them because I think, as long as he holds on to the role, he'll get the saves I'm more confident he'll get a number of saves that will make him relevant, unlike those guys. But
which guys? Who was that?
Like
Frank?
Hunter Harvey, the Giants relievers,
Tyler Rogers and Tony Watson. And
but what
talking
about
the real
Archie
bottom
Bradley,
feeders.
who every show I basically tout Archie Bradley. Like, I'm taking Archie Bradley over a Cardinals guy.
Yeah, I think skills wise, I don't think Archie Bradley is very good, but I don't think Ryan Helsley is very good either.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good skills comparison. And obviously Bradley has more job security than Helsley. So I'll put Helsley behind him, but I'll put him ahead of, those prospective closers for bad teams.
You guys are wrong about Archie Bradley. He had a great year.
We'll see. Time will tell, Adam. Byron Buxton was carted off with a foot injury last night. I mean, this guy's another one. Just like Aaron Judge, there's always something going on with Byron Buxton. One of our listeners tweeted at us last night and called him Mr. Glass. That's probably a fair nickname for Byron Buxton at this point. Have you guys seen those movies? Unbreakable, Split, Glass?
I've only seen Unbreakable. It is one of my favorite movies.
It's very good.
I think by far, hot take, by far M. Night Shyamalan's best movie.
No one else here has seen any of those movies? Unbreakable, Split, Glass?
I've heard of Unbreakable. Are those other sequels to it?
Yeah.
It's
there was like a 16 or 17 year gap in between them too, which was just
Split
wild.
was kind of like a sideways sequel. It wasn't like a direct sequel. It was part of the Unbreakable extended cinematic universe.
Oh, they're doing one of those things like Cloverfield's trying to do, maybe.
Yeah. No, they're good though. You should check them out if you can. Scott, if Byron Buxton is out, any interest in Jake Cave? Would he be the next guy up? I assume he would be.
It would have to be a deep league. I don't think he's totally talentless, but he strikes out a lot, and it would be a short-term thing. And it's just not an exciting enough skill set to really move the needle for me.
Cody Bellinger has altered his swing mechanics. He's not pleased with hitting 263 in the second half last season. Adam, does this matter? If so, how much?
I hate this. I absolutely hate this. Like, I could see him getting off to a slow start, and Scott was like going on a rant about changing the mechanics. Like, when we're talking about it, and yes, I don't like it. And the worst part, what I hate about stuff like this, it's like, are you really going to downgrade him because he's working on his swing? Might be a great thing. It might end up being great. You can't do anything about it from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah,
you just be annoyed.
It's just worry fodder.
Here's the dumb part. Yes, Cody Bellinger hit 263 last year. It's 2020. That doesn't matter. He had a 371 on base percentage. I mean, for real baseball, obviously it matters for fantasy, but like he had a 371 on base percentage and like a 920 OPS. It doesn't matter that he hits 263. Don't change your swing mechanics. Just do what worked.
And what's amazing about this is if we have the NL MVP changing his mechanics, the reigning NL MVP. We also have the reigning AL Cy Young winner, Justin Verlander. He's changing his mechanics too. And it's like,
What is going on?
I mean, Verlander's doing it. I think
Verlander has a reason.
Yeah, he's doing it because he thinks it'll. He had some injuries in spring training and is trying to stay healthy. So you can that's a little more defensible. But in both cases, it's like mechanics are everything in baseball. Like, how many times do we see this go the other way, where a nobody changes his mechanics and somebody becomes a stud?
I mean, Travis Shaw last year, he's talked about, he started working in the offseason on changing his mechanics.
And he stunk.
And the problem for him, and this is the real scary thing, is it didn't work. It didn't take. He just didn't feel comfortable with it and tried to go back to his old mechanics and just screwed his swing up entirely. But
I'm not dropping Bellinger, are you?
No,
I'm not.
No,
it's just not either. You have to have faith in the coaching staff that they're not going to let him do anything crazy. You have to have faith in the player. I mean, certainly somebody like Verlander, who's been around as long as he has, I feel like he's pretty in tune with his body. But it just presents this variable that is a very powerful variable, and you can't be sure it's not going to throw off the whole equation.
Let's quickly get through the rest of these notes. Dylan Carlson is on the outside looking in, apparently. According to Ann Rogers, who covers the Cardinals for MLB.com, the left field battle is between Tyler O'Neill and Lane Thomas. This seems like semantics to me, just to hold Carlson down for the first week or so of the season, Scott.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're a little more worried?
It could be. I'm less confident in Carlson getting that call out a weekend than I am in Nate Pearson, who, by the way, has an even easier in now with Chase Anderson dealing with a strained oblique.
Right.
I think that's an obvious case of, okay, we're just going to keep him down a turn, and then he'll be good to go from that point forward. I mean, Tyler O'Neill could take off. He has massive power potential. And then, it would be a case of Carlson would have to break in instead of Dexter Fowler, or it'd have to be a situation where Matt Carpenter gets hurt, something like that. So I don't think it's a slam dunk Carlson is up after a week. I think I'm less interested in drafting Carlson today than I was yesterday.
I will point out, Lane Thomas isn't entirely without appeal. He's played 207 games at AA and AAA. His overall minor league numbers are really quite poor. 252 average, 750 OPS. Since getting to AAA or AA and AAA, he's played 207 games, hit 265 with an OPS right around 820. But his 150 game pace is 27 homers and 21 steals. And so, he's another guy that if he does get an opportunity, there's potential for a power speed combination there. Not saying he's someone you should be drafting, but if he wins the job, it's not the worst thing in the world. Speaking
of prospects, Jared Kelenic of the Seattle Mariners homered twice yesterday. One coming off of a lefty. Man, the Mets are going to be kicking themselves for a long, long time after this trade. I still don't think that we see him this season just because of where the Mariners are at. I think it's kind of a similar situation to Mountcastle, except Kelenic is 3 or 4 years younger, so I just don't think that we're going to see him. Speaking of the Mariners, Kyle Lewis has apparently been crushing the ball. He's a forgotten man. His ADP is 393. That power is legit, so just a name to keep in mind on deeper 5 outfielder leagues, AL only for sure. Red Sox manager Ron Renicky once again confirmed that Brandon Workman will open the season as the team's primary closer. He had 16 saves last season with a 1.88 ERA, 13 Ks per 9, albeit the 9th highest walk rate for qualified relievers. Willie Calhoun, poor guy, just can't catch a break, was removed from Monday night's intra-squad game with a right hip flexor strain. The Rangers are calling it precautionary. Cross your fingers, hope for the best for Willie Calhoun. And then Christian Walker, diagnosed with a right groin strain. The D-backs are calling him day-to-day. Could be an opportunity for Kevin Crone to get in the lineup either as the first baseman or the DH. Among hitters with at least 75 plate appearances last season, Crone's 22.7% barrel rate was third best in baseball. So he hits the ball extremely hard. Promote a few things quickly. If you aren't listening to the First Cut podcast, what are you doing? These guys are absolutely crushing it, and Tiger Woods is back this week. Big Cat is making his first PGA Tour start since February at the Memorial Tournament at historic Muirfield Village. The First Cut Golf Podcast has you covered with 2 stacked preview shows and round-by-round recap pods as Tiger searches for career win number 83. You can find The First Cut on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. That is not all. In addition to running 2 listener leagues, continue to send in your submissions for that, by the way. The deadline is this Friday. We will be doing a live mock draft podcast this Friday, the same day, July 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with you, the listeners and viewers on YouTube. Pay attention to our Fantasy Baseball Today Facebook group Wednesday night. I'll drop something in there in order to choose the participants, but make sure that you're available again this Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be doing a live mock draft on the podcast. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to quickly recap our position previews that we did and answer some of your questions. FantasyBaseball@cbsi.com. Welcome back to Fantasy Baseball Today, and we're going to jump into the position recaps. What?
I'm calling you out.
What?
For something you did.
What I did?
In the previous section, running through the notes, running through the news. Oh, Byron Buxton, Mr. Glass. He can't stay healthy. Byron Buxton. You're criticizing the guy for can't stay healthy. And then Willie Calhoun. Poor guy just can't catch a break, you know?
Yeah, he can't catch a break.
Unfair. Neither Byron Buxton can't catch a break. Byron Buxton's had concussion issues. He's had all kinds of stuff. Willie Calhoun,
he got hit in the face with a ball. That's not his fault. You should know that. You're a Stanton fan.
You're not offering this kind of gratitude or grace towards a little guy named Giancarlo Stanton.
Oh gosh.
Or Aaron Judge. So
well, they're also going 150 picks higher. So
keep that same energy.
I think I have Byron Buxton ranked higher than Willie Calhoun. So I think I'm quite fair to him. Yes, I have him 1 spot higher than Willie Calhoun.
Wow.
Come on, Chris. I'm a fan of Byron Buxton. Don't sleep on him. All right, let's recap our position previews. Start things off with the catcher position. Scott, why don't you start us off here? What is your strategy for 1 catcher leagues versus 2 catcher leagues? And which catcher do you find yourself drafting most?
It doesn't actually change that much, 1 catcher and 2 catcher leagues for me. Ideally, it'd be great to get one of the top 5, Real Muto, Gary Sanchez, Wilson Contreras, Yasmani Grandal, or Mitch Garver. Mitch Garver seemingly being the one I'm getting most often because he goes the latest, and I think he has as much upside as anybody at the position. But if I don't, it's not the end of the world, and I just take, once everybody's had their fill in a 1 catcher league, I just take whoever's left because, I'm excited enough about Sean Murphy. I'm willing to gamble on Christian Vasquez because, if he isn't able to sustain, I'm sure something comparable will emerge on the waiver wire. So yeah, I don't really care that much if I can't get one of those top 5. 2 catcher league. I do play favorites, obviously, with those, that second, the number 2 type catchers. Danny Jansen, Adam mentioned him as a sleeper. I'm very high on him too. I've actually taken him as my top catcher in a 2 catcher league before. And my deep sleeper for a 2 catcher league is Isaiah Kiner Falefa of the Rangers, who they still seem to be giving serious thought to making him their everyday third baseman, an everyday player with catcher eligibility. An everyday player elsewhere with catcher eligibility has a playing time advantage over every other catcher. And oh yeah, Kiner Falefa has 6 home runs between spring training and summer camp so far. So he made some changes to his swing that are generating some real enthusiasm there. So he's my deep sleeper at catcher.
Don't forget the name Isaiah Kiner Falefa. First base. Adam, I'm going to throw first base your way. It's a shallow position. How are you typically handling that? Are you making it a priority to make sure you get, one of the top 10, one of the top 12 guys? How do you handle first base?
Yeah. Well, I've been a big Freddie Freeman fan. I really think if you take steals out of the equation, I think he's one of the probably 5 or 6 best hitters in the game. So I love getting him in round 2 if that's possible. Now it's, you can't take him in round 2. Obviously, we'll have to see. We'll have to monitor his status. But I don't want to go any lower than Josh Bell. Josh Bell is a first baseman I'm getting a lot. I'm not really sure if I should give this advice because it's really just a personal preference, but I don't really like Jose Abreu that much. Paul Goldschmidt doesn't really do it for me. So when you get, I know Frank loves Jose Abreu. When you get to that tier, Matt Olson and Josh Bell really stand out to me, and Bell goes significantly later than Matt Olson, 25, 24 picks later. So, talking about maybe 9 deep or so. I don't want to go much deeper than that. I really don't want Edwin Encarnacion to be my starting first baseman. I don't want Miguel Sano to be my first baseman after a week, and he's dealing with COVID too. So it is a shallow position, and unlike second base, where I'm fine being the last person to take a second baseman, I do not feel that way with first base. I'd like to get a top 8 or 9 first baseman.
Speaking of second base, Chris, you heard Adam just mention he doesn't mind waiting and being the last person to take a second baseman. Do you agree with that? This is also a very shallow position. Do you go out of your way to make sure that you get one earlier on, one of the elite second basemen? You did pay up for Ozzy Albies in our auction last week.
Yeah, part of the problem for me with second base is, I actually do prefer not to wait at second base because I don't love the late round options at second base. A lot of the guys that people are really high on in the 15th round and later at second base are guys like Gavin Lux, Scott Kingery when he gains eligibility, Ryan McMahon, and Garrett Hampson, who I don't really love any of those guys. I see why people like them, but I think they're all pretty long shots to be significant fantasy contributors. And so if I do wait, my options are pretty much limited to like the batting average specialists like Kevin Newman, maybe Cesar Hernandez, although he's less of a batting average specialist than like a runs specialist. But then Tommy La Stella and Luis Arias are probably the guys I'm going for if I wait, and it's a somewhat underwhelming late round group.
That's you shouldn't have to get them in as the 12th second baseman off the board.
No, it's more that I just
right.
don't.
If you don't want to take a shot on the high upside of like the relative lottery tickets of a Lux or Hampson, or I guess you could even put Kevin Biggio, maybe even Tommy Edman in that group, then that's the next class at second base, the guys he's talking about.
Yeah, but you can get Mike Moustakas around 100th overall.
Right, that's why I want my second baseman to.
They are in the top 12. Sorry,
I want my second baseman in the first 100 picks usually.
All right, fair enough.
That's what I was saying, is because I don't love the like 100 through 200 range at second base.
So I want to clarify, because I completely agree, but in a head-to-head points league, there's a good chance that only 12 second basemen are going to be drafted. Some of them, like Glaber, might be played at shortstop, maybe. But,
sure.
Number like Jonathan VR. I drafted Jonathan VR, was the last second baseman in a head-to-head points league, like the 15th round or something like that. So I feel like if you feel pretty sure that nobody's drafting a backup, then you can wait. But I agree. You don't want to go much deeper than 12 because it does get pretty horrible after that.
Yeah, and some of the steal specialists are just getting disrespected too far. I mean, we talk about this with Trey Turner, but Jonathan VR still averaged 3.2 fantasy points per game. So, yes, he's better in Roto than he is in head-to-head points, but I think sometimes he gets dinged a little bit too much in a head-to-head points league.
Although, if you think his home run output is going to be cut in half moving from Baltimore to Florida, then
he'll still be top 12.
His fantasy points per game is going to be much lower than
that's like
2, and he's going to probably drop out of the startable range.
Yeah, I mean, if he lost 10 home runs over the course of a full season, you're probably looking at that's legitimately probably a quarter of a fantasy point per game loss. I mean, if you add in the runs and RBI, maybe a little more.
So you don't worry about that so much in Roto League because you just need the steals however you can get him, and he's going to give you a big chunk of those. But I understand.
Aren't you fine with him being your 15th pick and your starting second baseman?
Oh yeah, no, sure. I don't think it's a bad gamble at all. But it is a gamble. Like you can't just bank on him being your starting second baseman all season in a points league because we're anticipating statistical drop off. Sure.
Yeah.
The guy he was last year be a great starter for you, but we don't think he's going to be that again.
No.
Yeah, even if he was a 12 to 15 home run pace with 30 to 35 steals, again, pace, I think that's still a serviceable player, should be inside the top 12. From the most shallow position to probably the deepest position, Scott, third base, do you just wait or do you take the best value whenever it kind of presents itself on the board? Because there's just so many good third basemen.
Yeah, I just anticipate I'm going to draft 2 and possibly 3 third basemen, and I don't worry so much about filling that position too soon. obviously easier in a standard Roto league with the corner infield spot available. And even taking that approach, I mean, it doesn't always work out that I'm drafting that many. I guess just the main thing is if it's the appropriate point in round 1 or round 2 to take Bregman or Jose Ramirez or Nolan Arenado or Anthony Rendon, I'm not thinking about, okay, third base is deep, so I'm going to consciously pass this guy over. Because, a lot of the depth, they're multi-eligible guys. Of course, JD Davis, I make a point to draft in basically every draft I can. Sometimes it's to fill third base, but he's, just as often it's to fill the outfield. So you can take advantage of that. You can take advantage of corner infield spot. But yeah, there are basically, I think there are over 20 must start third baseman, over 20. So like, it's really hard to just get a nobody to just get shut out at the position. That's probably not going to happen. But that doesn't mean you should pass up talent when it's obviously the right pick. You just have to recognize that you're probably going to end up with more than one. And, it's reason maybe, I don't want to say that. I'm just gonna put a period on it. I'm just gonna say that's it.
No, I think it was well said how you said it though. Like, don't pass up on the talent just because the position is deep. But when the opportunity presents itself, you should jump on it. And that's what I did in our auction last week. I just waited for the best value, and I got Donaldson at $15, and I was perfectly fine with that as my starting third baseman. At shortstop, this is likely the second deepest position. I'll take this one. And I said yesterday in Roto, I'm trying to grab one of Trey Turner, one of Adalberto Mondesi. I want a difference maker in steals in this shortened season, and I think those two guys really stand out in that category. In a head-to-head points league, I'm going to lean closer towards what Adam was saying about second base. I think you can wait for shortstop. You can get guys later on like Corey Seager as, the 10th or 12th shortstop off the board, and I'd be perfectly fine with that. I do typically target Manny Machado if he's available in those middle rounds, but Seager specifically, Jorge Polanco. Polanco averaged the same fantasy points per game as Gleyber Torres last year, so I have no problem waiting for either one of Seager or Jorge Polanco at that position. Adam, in the outfield, how's your strategy?
I am willing to stake my entire fantasy reputation on Carlos Correa. I just want to say that he is the best value in drafts, and he should be your starting shortstop. You will win your league because of him. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and he's probably going to play 20 games in a 60-game season. All right, Adam, outfield. How does your strategy change in a 3 outfielder league versus a 5 outfielder league?
Big change. 3 outfielder league. I don't want to take more than 2 with my first, let's say, 10 picks, honestly. Maybe more like 8, because if Stanton or Judge fall to like the 8th or 9th round, I might just have to be like, okay, I'm filling up all my starting spots. But man, there are just so many good outfielders that are going to go in the teens in 3 outfielder leagues that you're just like, oh, I can't draft this guy? Really? I feel that, yeah, okay, he could be my utility, but that means now I can't draft another third baseman. This is now I can't draft Chris Davis as my utility. So you have to have a special outfielder to take 3 of them with your first 8 to 10 picks, I'd say. 5 outfielder league, there's this range of outfielders that I was looking at earlier during our sleeper discussion. Ryan Braun, Adam Eaton, Justin Upton. It's a pretty good range. And they're around, I think, 200 or so overall in ADP. So I'd be looking at that for like my 4th guy. I'm fine with my 5th outfielder being kind of a flyer. He doesn't have to be a great player. He could be just one of my last picks and somebody I'm going to shuffle that roster spot throughout the year. But I think it's pretty important in a 5 outfielder league to try to get at least 2 outfielders that you really like. So they don't have to be, don't have to be Christian Yelich, but you don't want to have 5 outfielders after the first 7 rounds or something like that. Don't wait too long. Don't fill up too early in 3 outfielder leagues. Don't wait too long to start getting your outfielders in 5 outfielder leagues.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that this position is also deep. I'm looking at Scott's rankings deep into his 50s. I mean, Justin Upton, Adam Eaton, Shin-Soo Choo. I mean, if you get one of those guys, 2 of those as your outfield 4 and outfield 5 in a Roto, I don't think that is an issue.
I mean, just look at ADP. 61 through 65 or 61 through 64 is Avisail Garcia, David Peralta, Jock Peterson, Nick Senzel. In a Roto league, and maybe in Garcia's case in a points league, those guys could all be must-start players.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
unlikely, but there's
upside.
there are more players, especially in a points league after pick 100. Most of the time, the best available hitter left is going to be an outfielder. That's just
or the most interesting, which I mean, maybe is the same thing. Like that's how I'd put the out. Like there's no shortage of upside in the outfield ever. There are just so many players who play that position. They're usually offensive minded players. Yeah. They contribute in a variety of ways. There's always going to be another steals guy in the outfield, always going to be another power guy in the outfield. Yep. So if there's any position where I feel like I'm willing to come out of the draft acknowledging I'm weak, it's outfield, because I know I'm going to be able to fill it on the fly more confidently than I can anywhere else. Even at a time when infield is like historically deep right now, it just doesn't compare to beyond, once you get out of the draftable range of hitters, there's always more options to be found in the outfield.
Scott, let's go right back to you when it comes to starting pitchers. It sounds like you've kind of settled in here with 4 of your top 30. We've lost some of those starting pitchers along the way since February and March. Lost some guys to injury, and I've kind of adopted that. I have stole your strategy basically. I typically target 2 or 3 of my top 20, and then I have to get one of Montas.
Chris does it sometimes, whether he acknowledges it or not.
Well, no, it depends on if the draft falls that way, but it's not my goal.
Yeah, it's not an edict.
I do have an edict. It's just not Scott's.
Yeah.
Tell us more, Scott.
I've lost count exactly what the number is now. If it's 30, 35, 37, it's smaller than 37, and it's gotten a little. The lines have started to blur around the edges because of the impact of a shortened season, and workload considerations aren't what they were before. So is Zach Wheeler in or out? Is Madison Bumgarner in or out? Or I'm on the fence about guys like that. Kenta Maeda, he's on the fence now too. But yes, usually those on the fence guys, now I'm targeting them as my 5th and getting 4 even earlier than that. And that includes Lance Lynn is probably at the back end of that group, Corey Kluber, guys like that. I mean, guys who in the last couple years have been in Cy Young contention. So it's a very deep class of high-end starting pitchers, of real difference makers at that position. It just, the position craters soon thereafter. You got that very deep class of, some of the most dominant pitchers we've ever seen. And then that kind of blurry class, and then maybe a few upside plays beyond that, but ones you can't really count on to be regular contributors for you. And then it's just all garbage. So you have to make an investment in that position, or you just have no chance of hanging with the people who do. Even acknowledging it's a volatile position, you just have to kind of lean into the volatility and in fact maybe overdo it as a way of counteracting that volatility.
All right, Chris, you called me out for skipping over Willie Calhoun getting hurt, and your reward is you get to talk about relief pitchers. So, how about that?
I get stuck with relief pitcher and second base. I see what's going on here, Frank.
You can't call out your host.
Relief pitcher is a position that you have to fill in a head-to-head points league, and it's a position that you don't have to fill in a Roto league.
That's it. That's your.
Did you want? Okay.
Are we back to liking? Are we back to liking Sparps? Is what I wanted to ask you regarding head-to-head leagues, because we did have some concern, but now it seems like these guys are building up, more aggressively than we originally had thought. And then if you're doing a Roto draft, how many closers or would-be closers do you typically come away with?
I am not back to believing in Sparps. I actually wrote a mailbag column today, and one of the questions was, what are some changes in strategy for a shorter season? And look, I know there's a lot of talk about guys being at their regular workload to the start of the season. That doesn't happen in a normal season. Guys are usually, outside of the elite guys, the first couple of starts, they're still, 90, 92 pitches for the most part. And you look at all the Sparps, there's a reason they're Sparps, and it's because they weren't starting last season. And so there are questions about how quickly they can work up to their full workload. There are questions about how deep I mean, even before he tested positive for COVID, there were real questions about how deep Jesus Luzardo was going to be able to go into games, and Julio Urias, and some of those other guys, Carlos Carrasco even. And so I actually think Sparps are kind of worthless potentially in the shortened season, at least for the first couple of weeks of the season. And that's a big deal. If guys aren't getting quality starts and guys aren't getting wins early in the season, like you have to go 6 innings to get a quality start. I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't happen for Jesus Luzardo for his first handful of starts, unless he's just absolutely unbelievably good. And
but it is probably going to happen for Carlos Carrasco. It is probably going to happen for Kenta Maeda. If Carlos Martinez is indeed a starter, it is probably going to happen for him. So I don't think it's
Carlos Martinez. Given that he's on a delayed start and he's only thrown 2 innings in a simulated start so far, I would say it's probably less true for Carlos Martinez. But sure, Kenta Maeda and Carlos Carrasco. I'm more confident in Kenta Maeda pitching deep into games than Carlos Carrasco, just because we don't know what the after effects of him going through treatment for was it leukemia?
Yes.
What the after effects are going to be and how he's going to react to a full workload. So, that is a question. And I think just in terms of the Sparks specifically in a head-to-head points league, the quality start and the win are so important to the Sparks having that value. And if they don't have that value, or if they're less likely to have that value, I'm more likely to just go with a traditional closer in those spots. Maybe you bump up a Kenta Maeda, maybe you bump up a Carlos Carrasco, one of the Sparks you can feel confident goes deep in games. But on the whole, I think the Spark class has gone from what might have been the best Spark class of all time coming into the season. There were like 8 to 10 guys who I legitimately would have been happy to have as my Spark in a normal season, to one where I think for the most part they might not have a lot of value. And then in Roto, I want 3 closers. Typically, it's something like Edwin Diaz or Craig Kimbrell. And then one of the lower end guys, I've drafted Tony Watson with my last pick a bunch of times because I think he can be the Giants closer. But, Brandon Kinsler, someone like that. And then Carlos Martinez is a key part of my closer strategy now. This last week before the season starts, I'm going to try to get Carlos Martinez as much as possible.
All right, we didn't get to your questions today. Apologies. We will get to them the next couple of days heading into, this is going to be the biggest draft weekend heading into the season. Next week is opening day. We're already getting there. For Adam, Scott, and Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching on the Fantasy Baseball Today YouTube channel. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.